Abolitionist movement.
An abolitionist is a person who wants to abolish or put an end to slavery. A group of abolitionists came together to create the abolitionist movement, which would hopefully put an end to slavery and let liberty reign to all people.
Some of these abolitionists were Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Nat Turner, William Lloyd Garrison, Harriet Beecher Stowe, and John Brown. These citizens helped promote the abolitionist movement, which allowed citizens to represent why they believed that everyone should be created equal.
During the abolitionist movement, people were divided between two sides, the northern and the southern regions. The northern region of the United States was a free land. Anyone could live there and there were no slaves. However, in the South, it was the opposite. All African Americans were slaves to their slaveholders and had no way to reach freedom.
The only way African Americans could have freedom was if they crossed the border into northern territories without being caught by the slaveholders or the government. This was the only way to escape until the Fugitive Slave Acts of 1850. Slaves did not have any rights or the ability to stand up for themselves.
The abolitionist movement helped contribute to the creation of the Fugitive Slave Acts, the Underground Railroad, and legislation to guide an end to slavery. During the abolitionist movement, Abraham Lincoln became president on March 4, 1861, and he held a neutral viewpoint about the whole ideology of slavery in general. For example, instead of abolishing slavery completely throughout the United States or adding on to it, he let the North be free and he didn't care what happened in the South. But during the westward expansion in 1803, Lincoln decided not to let slavery permit in the West. Due to his decision, he kept both abolitionists and people for slavery happy for a short term while also delaying the start of the Civil War.
The movement was part of the reason why the Fugitive Slave Acts of 1793 and 1850 were put into place. In 1793, slaves were escaping to Canada to get away from their owners, and because of this, slave owners demanded stricter laws. And in 1850, it became a law that everybody had to help capture runaway slaves. Because of the law, it created the Fugitive Slave Acts of 1850. Abolitionists became outraged because they felt that they were part of the slave system.
In 1857, the Dred Scott case occurred where a slave went to court to get his and his wife's freedom from their owner. They did this after they all moved to the northern states, but later moved back to the South. Because they were slaves, the U.S. Supreme Court said that the enslaved were not citizens and therefore could not expect any protection from the federal government or the court.
Since this case hit the Supreme Court, it only grew in scope and significance as slavery became the single most explosive issue in American politics. This case also influenced the 13th and 14th Amendment, but these didn't get passed until January 31st, 1865 for the 13th and July 9th, 1868 for the 14th. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery while the 14th states that all people born in the United States were citizens.
In 1846, David Wilmot proposed a law to ban slavery in the New Western, but Southern leaders believed that Congress didn't have the rights to ban slavery in the West.
Slavery had a big impact on economics because there were several tactics involved in slavery. An important factor is selling slaves to other slaveholders. From Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, it states, "Well, since you must all know, it is so. I have agreed to sell Tom and Harry both, and I don't know why I'm to be rated, as if I were a monster, for am I in doing what everyone else does every day?" From this piece of the narrative, it can be seen back then people thought it was normal to sell and buy slaves as if they were objects.
According to Scott Sumner at econlib.org, abolishing slavery made America a much more productive and hence richer country. Also, in the Fugitive Slave Acts of 1850, there were special courts created for runaway slaves, and when slaves were sent back to the South by judges, they would receive $10. But even if they didn't get sent back to the South, the judges still received $5.
Frederick Douglass, one of the many abolitionists, believed that the 4th of July was a holiday made out of mockery for the enslaved people because they didn't have any liberty or freedom, something that the whites celebrated. According to Frederick Douglass's article, What to the Slave is the 4th of July, he believes that it's a disgrace to the nation and that we should be ashamed.
The Fugitive Slave Acts of 1793 increased the number of abolitionists. Later, in 1850, people would go look for runaway slaves in the North, which Northerners did not like.
In 1860, South Carolina declared their independence from the nation due to the fact that they wanted independence and didn't want to support slavery. Overall, the abolitionist movement was a huge factor in ending slavery and influenced the start of the Civil War. The movement created by the abolitionists helped drive the beginning of creating all people to show equal rights in the United States.
Even though the abolitionist movement created tension between the northern and the southern regions, it still had an impact ending on slavery.
Abolitionist movement.